Coach, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to do this interview. And I just want to start off, you've just won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and I'm just curious, do you have a favorite memory from each and the run that you had?
Well, I think probably my favorite recollection of both cups is when the coaches were standing together on the ice and watching each respective player raise the cup over their heads. For me, it brought back so many different memories of defining moments through the course of the playoffs that these guys made such a commitment for us to win. So when I was standing there watching them raise the cup over their heads and see the emotion on their faces, it's just raw emotion. And I couldn't be more proud of this group or this group of players for what they've been able to accomplish. And I think when it really hit me in both years, when we were all standing on the ice and the coaching staff was kind of down in the corner, just taking it all in.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you from a fan perspective for all the memories you guys gave us. I am curious, so you spent 11 years in the NHL as a player, and obviously you played a lot before that. Now you've been a coach for several years. What do you wish you knew about leadership when you were a player that you now know as a coach? Or what do you wish your players knew about the responsibility that comes with coaching?
Well, I think, leadership manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And what I've been able to witness over the last 2 years, watching this group of players come together as a team, is that every single player on this team at some point during the course of the seasons has been called upon to lead in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's what brings teams together, and that's what makes great teams great. And so some leaders are vocal, and that's how it manifests itself. Other leaders lead by example, and they might be quiet leaders. Other leaders are just situational. When circumstances arise with some of the challenges that the league presents, and players arise in certain situations to help us overcome challenges. And so I think when I look back and reflect on the last 2 seasons in particular, and this particular group of players, and for the most part we've had the same group for 2 years in a row, 2 seasons in a row. That's the biggest thing that jumps out at me. It's not just when people think about our leadership group. Yes, we have guys that wear letters on their sweaters, and myself as the head coach take on a leadership role because of my title. But I think what really makes great teams great is when everyone right through the bench takes on some sort of a leadership role throughout the course of each respective season.
Yeah, you talked about the different kind of leaders. I'm just curious, how would you describe yourself as a leader? How do you lead?
I think as the head coach, you have to lead in a lot of ways. Sometimes it's vocal, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes as a head coach, you have to gain control by relinquishing control, and so by empowering others. And so one of the things that I've tried to do here in Pittsburgh with this Penguins group, since I became the head coach, was to give the players some ownership for what goes on here. We want them to have a stake in the game. I think it helps us with buy-in as far as what we're trying to sell as the coaching staff to this group of players. Everything from style of play to how we come to the rink every day and how we behave. So, I'm a strong believer that when our players have a stake in the game and take ownership for what goes on a day-to-day basis, it certainly helps us as far as the sell on getting buy-in to what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your journey. It's been a crazy journey, it seems like. So you started off as coach in Boston, had a great year, not so great year, got let go, became an assistant coach for many years, then you went to Chicago's player development, then you go to the minor leagues, and then all of a sudden you get called up again to the Pens and win 2 cups. What do you wish people knew about that leadership journey? What are maybe 1 or 2 lessons you learned along the way?
Well, I think, the first thing that jumps out at me is that, the coaching profession is hard. And there are certain things that you can control, and there are certain things that you can't. And it's a learning process. And I think all coaches go through it. You know, I call it the evolution of a coach. You know, when you're a young coach, you're trying to be diligent, and you dot every I and cross every T, and you check every box, and you do everything within your power to try to help your team have success. I think as you evolve as a coach, you start to learn the nuances of the profession, and I think a lot of it boils down with managing people, how you interact with your players, and the only way you learn that is through experience. And so I think first and foremost, the coaching profession is hard. I have so much respect for all of those coaches that are in it, because you really have to love what you're doing in order to stay in it, because it more often than not you fail. There's only one coaching staff every year that celebrates, and the rest of them are trying to figure out how do we get to the top of the mountain. And so that's just the reality of the business that we chose. So I think you really have to love what you're doing in order to stay in it. And I think when you look at my journey to becoming the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's a perfect example. You know, I thought after my experience with Boston, and I thought it was worthwhile for me to take a step back and be an assistant coach. I fast-tracked to that head coaching position. I was 1 year removed as a player when I was the head coach of the Boston Bruins. I was 35 years old. And so I was coaching some players in Boston that I had played with the year that I had played for the Bruins. And that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And so I fast-tracked to that position. And so I thought it made sense for me, if I was going to be in this for the long term, to take a step back, work with someone that's had success, has won a Stanley Cup, has won championships at different levels, and learn and see how they go about their business every day. How do they interact with the star players? How do they handle certain situations and challenges that this league presents? Because inevitably it's a challenging league. Yeah. You know, it's a competitive league. There's a lot of bright, smart people in every aspect of this business. And so I thought that was a worthwhile experience for me, and that was why I made the decision to join Torts down in Tampa when I became Torts' assistant. And I told Torts that when I went down there. I had aspirations to be a head coach, but I wanted to learn from him and try to help him have success. And so that was my motivation when I chose to become an assistant coach. My hope was I didn't have to stay there as long as I did. It was almost a decade before I had an opportunity to be a head coach again. But that's the nature of the business. It's a hard business. There's a lot of really good coaches. There's only a finite amount of positions. And so, you know, it's going to challenge your resolve, and it's going to challenge your passion for what you do. There were some days when, you know, I would wake up and say, you know, am I ever going to get another chance? And is this worth it? And so, but I chose to stick with it because I love the game. I love being on the ice. I love the interaction with the players. I love the sport of hockey. I love everything that comes with it. And so, and part of what comes with it is it's going to knock you down. Yeah. And you're going to have to be prepared to, you know, get up, dust yourself off, and get back in the fight. If this is the profession that you chose, I think you've got to be prepared for that type of an experience. And so I can't be more grateful for the opportunity that I've been given here with this Pittsburgh Penguins team. You know, I took over this team at a time when they were vulnerable, but they're really good people and they're really good players, and it's a privilege to coach this group.
Yeah, walk me through that. So you had a decade of preparation almost before you step in your next head coach role. You get the head coach role. You walk into a locker room. There's Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Fleury, Letang. The team wasn't performing up to its potential, and you did something right. You turned it around. You got buy-in. Can you talk about what was it like, and what was your strategy going into that locker room? How did you get the buy-in of the team so quickly and turn things around?
Well, I think, you know, when you look at our dressing room on the outside, it can be an intimidating dressing room to walk into. You know, we have a lot of star power. We have a lot of stature in that room, and so we have a lot of players that have accomplished a lot in this game. And so from that standpoint, it can be an intimidating dressing room to walk into. Having said that, my experience over the years of coaching other teams and star players in the league had prepared me for that very circumstance and that very situation. You know, when I first took the team over, I think when I think about the mindset that the group was in, they were vulnerable. You know, whenever there's a coaching change, it's usually because expectations haven't been met. And so a coach in a lot of situations becomes the first decision or the first line of defense, and so it's hard to change 20 players. So usually there's a coaching change when that type of a situation arises in our game. And so I knew they were vulnerable, and this is a proud group. They're good players. They have a lot of pride. They all want to do well, and so they were overwhelmed by the circumstance. So when I took the team over, I knew one of my first challenges was to try to free them up a little bit and to allow them to play and act on their instincts. I had to find a way to get them not so much focused on the situation they're in or the overwhelming circumstance, and more focused on the game itself, the process. Let's just focus on the process. So our very first meeting, when I met with them in the locker room, I looked around the room and I said, when I look around this room, I see a lot of great hockey players that have accomplished a lot in this game. No one has more respect for the players in this room than me. And I said, our challenge is to find a way to become a great team, because great players don't win championships in this league. Great teams win championships. And that was the very first meeting that I had with them, and then I talked to them about not so much listening to what people are saying about us, because at the time, there were a lot of critics saying Crosby was on the downside and Malkin was on the downside, and this Pittsburgh Penguins core, their best years were behind them, and that was the talk going on around the team. And I think our players, they felt it. These guys are human beings. They have feelings. And so I try to shield them from that, and we try to get away from the focus on that, and just come into the rink every day and just focus on hockey. Let's just try to get better every day. Let's come to the rink, let's have a good attitude, put a smile on your face, we'll celebrate the small successes, and we'll try to get better each and every day. And we will slowly but surely work our way out of it. But it's going to be a daily endeavor, and we're going to have to rely on one another. And that was the first meeting that I had with them. And we slowly but surely crawled our way out of the hole that we were in. And I have to tell you, it was a pleasure to watch these guys come together as a group.
Yeah. So you got the respect, you won a cup. As I've watched your leadership from afar, you've had to make some tough decisions, right? Who's playing, when to set people, all these different decisions you make. Can you talk about, from a leader's perspective, making the hard decisions, having the hard conversations to bring out the best in your players?
Sure. I think it's hard to be a head coach in this league if you're not willing or prepared to make those types of decisions, because that's the responsibility that you have. And so my approach with this group and some of the difficult decisions that I've made have been just based on honesty. And we sit as a coaching staff and a management team, and we discuss those types of decisions. I rely a lot on the people around me. I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some really bright hockey people and hockey minds and good people that care about our players, and these are difficult decisions, and they're hard conversations to have when you have to make these types of decisions. And my approach with these guys has always been that I'm trying to make the most informed decision that I can. We weigh the pros and the cons, and we try to make the best decision that's in the best interest of helping this hockey team win. And usually my conversation with the respective player revolves around something like, I don't expect you to agree with the decision that I have made or we have made as a coaching staff. My hope is that you'll respect the decision. And I always explain the decision that we make and why we make it. And as I said, these guys are proud guys, they're competitive guys, they want to play, and they don't always agree with the decision that we make, and I understand that, that's part of it. But certainly I hope they walk away from the conversation respecting the decision that we make. And I don't know any other way to do it but to be honest and be respectful with each player. Yeah,
I love that. Are there any other leadership principles that you consistently live by, or that you're like, these are my main practices as a leader?
Well, I think when I think about leadership philosophies, my most important philosophy revolve around a couple of things: respect, responsibility, and honesty. And I think if you're respectful of people around you, and you take responsibility and ownership for what your role and your job is to help your team win, and you're honest with people and straightforward with people, I think you can have the conversations that you need to have. You know, my feeling is if you push something under the rug or you don't see things for what they are, you know, that there can be a compound effect there. Before you know it, there's a lot of stuff under the rug, and that becomes a real difficult problem to solve. So my feeling is we take challenges on a daily basis that arise. We try to solve them as best we can, and we try to solve them around the principles that I identified. We're respectful of our players and the people that we work with. It's my responsibility to help solve these problems, and we try to approach it in an honest fashion. And our hope is that our players will respect it. And so, you know, that's really been our mantra here since I took the team over. I've been fortunate to be surrounded with a group of players that have been receptive to the message that we've been preaching since I've been here, and we've had so much fun working with this group of guys.
That's awesome. And last question, I always like to ask leaders this: if you could go back and have coffee or breakfast with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him or any other young leader at that age?
I would say I would probably tell my 20-year-old self, don't be so concerned about what other people think, to stick to your convictions. And I think when you're young, you're impressionable, and everyone wants to be liked. And so I think sometimes that can overpower or can dilute your convictions and where you actually want to go. And so, you know, for me, I think as I've matured and I look back over the years that I've been a player and a coach, I think I'm more true to myself now than I've ever been. I'm comfortable in my own skin and when I get up in the morning and how I approach my job every day. I know when I drive home from the rink that my intention is always in the right place and trying to help this team win and move forward and advance, but also be respectful of people along the way. And so I think when I was a young 20-year-old, if I had the benefit of that experience, I might have done some things differently along the way.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for your time. Good luck this season, Coach.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.